Rachel, good morning.
Morning. Hopefully you can hear me
Oh
now.
yeah, loud and clear. I mean, as loud and clear and without static that we can figure out in this edge of the world town. Thank you for zooming in today. And I don't know if you got a chance to hear. We hosted the Clayoquot Biosphere Trust yesterday, and they were giving a small introduction to you and your work and the workshop that's happening next week. But we get very excited about, anything, or I get very excited, I should speak for myself, about anything pertaining to kids and kids in this region. So I thought, well, I'd like to flush this topic of risky play out even more with you, the expert, PhD candidate at UBC. You're really, you're so knowledgeable in the topic. Could you introduce our listeners to who you are?
For sure. So, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to join your community later this weekend and into next week to talk about this important topic. I'm actually joining you today from the unceded and traditional territories of the Coast Salish peoples, and our work takes place at the University of British Columbia and some of the surrounding regions in Greater Vancouver and all across British Columbia. So I am, as you said, a PhD candidate in the School of Population and Public Health at UBC, and I work at the Play Outside Lab, which is exactly as it sounds. It's a whole lab dedicated to research on outdoor and risky play. And we are led by Dr. Mariana Bersoni, who's been in this field for many, many years and has really steered this area of research in Canada. So a bit about us. We get to research this topic every day, which I feel very fortunate to do.
How did you get involved with studying risky play, and why?
Yeah, that's a great question. My path has been a bit windy. I guess as a child, I was exposed to risky play and outdoor play. I played outside in my neighborhood, but I would also say I don't want to reveal my age too much, but I'm kind of was at that cusp where social media was a part of my life as well. We had phones and screens going into high school. And so I really saw this shift where a lot of children were moving more inside throughout my childhood. And so when I went into university, I studied mostly related to physical activity and how to get kids more active, really reflecting back on my own childhood and wanting to bring the outdoors and physical activity, make it prominent for children. And then that kind of led me into this area of outdoor and risky play and how, structured sports are actually, they serve a role and they're important. I was in competitive sport growing up as well, but that children also need this free play and independence separate from sport. And so that kind of veered me into a different area of physical activity research, focusing on this free play movement and getting children to take risks and challenges. So I've been involved in this area for about the last 15 years and really focused lately in the last 5 years on the design of outdoor spaces. So how we can ensure that they're enticing and welcoming for children.
I have so many questions for you, but because you just finished with talking about parks and outdoor spaces, thank you for mentioning it. I'm so curious. Are there any parks in North America that stand out to you that you have visited or studied where that's a giant yes for you? You're like, this is designed for adventure, risky play. It's not built with keeping kids safe. It has safety mechanisms, but this is so well designed for this particular type of play. And where are those parks? Because I want to take my kids.
Yeah. I'm a bit biased, so there's actually one in my home community called the Terra Nova Adventure Park, and it's built within the last 10 years. And I think they've really done a great job at incorporating diverse challenges. So there's different levels of challenge. I have a 1 year old and we take her there all the time. And while she can't necessarily climb the big, tall tower that has lots of different ways to get up, she can watch and observe older children do these challenging and risk-taking things. And then there's also logs and things for her to balance on. So I love that, first of all, it's nestled into this beautiful nature park, which in my urban community, we don't have necessarily a ton of. So you can explore and do some of the trails, see the wildlife. And then there's also this beautiful adventure park that isn't overly constructed, but it provides the challenge and diversity that a lot of those cookie cutter playgrounds we see don't have. It's something different. So that's for me one that stands out and one we go to quite a bit. There are definitely others that I've seen in the lower mainland. And I think for the most part, what we normally see at our school playgrounds or the community playgrounds is a lot of the same things. You know, there's a slide with a ladder or maybe rubber surfacing. And I think with my work, I've talked to a lot of children doing some qualitative work, and what they need is that context. They need that character. They need something that stands out to make them want to come back. And often that relates to an element of challenge. So if it's not challenging, then it's boring. So
That was going to be my next question in terms of, well, I want to talk about why risky play is important, but I also want to chat about, what the kids are saying. Cause I'm assuming with your research, you're perhaps talking to kids and getting their feedback about, different levels of risky play, like how they feel after risky play. So I do want to get to what you're learning from children. But I just want to ask, like, why is risky play important? And in your research, and you're presenting it as risky play, is it the same thing as outdoor adventure play, or there has to be some element of risk for there to be a reward?
yeah, great question. So risky play, the definition we use is it's called thrilling and exciting forms of play that involve uncertainty and a risk of physical injury. So that can
Wow.
feel alarming. Yeah, that can feel alarming, but it's quite purposeful because risk always requires some element of risk navigation. And that's kind of the key skill or piece we're trying to tease out here for children in their play experiences is that in life, in everyday life, there are elements of risk that children encounter. And it's navigating that risk that's really going to create those critical resiliency skills, risk navigation as they get older. So, this form of play is really trying to allow children to make their own choices and determine their own comfort level, having to weigh out the benefits from the potential risk of an action. And I want to pause because I know sometimes when we talk about injury, it can be very scary. But as adults, we also have a role to ensure children are kept safe. And that can mean looking for hazards. And so we really differentiate between a risk and a hazard. Hazard is something that as adults we know could pose serious injury. So we're talking about head injuries, life altering
Mm-hmm.
injuries. When we talk about risk taking, we're talking about scrapes and bumps and bruises and things that children naturally encounter over their lifespan, right? So climbing onto a rock that's 2 feet off the ground could potentially cause a scrape or a bruise, but it's also a life event that teaches that child something. So that's kind of the difference in these hazards. As adults, we have a role to prevent serious injury. So we're talking about like traffic, right? With heavy cars on a road, we know then we're not going to let children navigate that on their own
Of
if they've
course.
never done it before.
So are you qualitatively seeing differences in children when they get to adulthood? If you look at like two different streams of the population, children that were encouraged to play outside, take risks, and those that perhaps were a little bit more sedentary or had parents that were risk averse. How does that manifest in adolescence or later in life?
So we haven't done necessarily anything looking into adulthood, but what we do know from other research around the world is that those skills you develop in early childhood, such as risk navigation or critical thinking skills, those are the foundation that can translate to other areas of your life beyond just playing outdoors as you get older. And so one area of research we're really focusing on, and others across the world, is this idea that it can provide this resiliency mechanism for thinking about mental health into youth, how to manage big emotions. Thinking, actually, I just wanted to point out there's a researcher in Norway named Dr. Ellen Sandsetter, and she's actually done some work on how risky play has some antiphobic effects. So the more you're exposed to situations where there's this element of uncertainty, the less likely you are to be scared of it down the road. So that could be something like heights. If you've never climbed heights before, you might develop this fear to it later in life. So there's lots and lots of work going on, and I will point out one of our most recent data sets we've been working with is actually looking at the Childhood Experiences Questionnaire, which is called the CHECK, and it's through the Human Early Learning Partnership that Dr. Mariana Brusoni also leads. And some of the recent evidence that we've looked at has said that these chances for risky play in early childhood, so we're talking like 3, 4 years old, then when we look a year later into kindergarten, those experiences are critical to setting children up for success on entry to the school years. So that's just 1 year of difference, but there's a significant effect at reducing vulnerability on entry to school. So, I mean, I'm sure that effect would just be even more magnified as they get older. And it's something we're hoping to look at over time with
And
some
do
of
you
our
mean
data.
social vulnerability, like the children that are involved with risky play as toddlers are socially more resilient by the time they get to kindergarten? Like when you say vulnerability, what do you mean?
So vulnerability is a term we use for the EDI instrument, and it's an instrument that kindergarten teachers fill out at kindergarten. And vulnerability could be there's different scales. So there's like physical vulnerability. So maybe they're not meeting um, the full needs of their physical development at that
Mm-hmm.
age, or their social or their language skills, or even their emotion skills. So that could be self-regulation. Some of the things are like, can they tie their shoes? Can they um, connect with their peers? So there's lots and lots of different factors that go into
Okay.
that vulnerability. But overall, what we're seeing is that it's kind of a measure of school readiness. So are they um, at kindergarten ready to learn, and are they meeting kind of their developmental needs?
Are you seeing with young children, especially, that kids inherently are risk adverse, or are potentially the parents risk adverse and holding their children back from engaging in risky play?
I think it's a bit of both. We definitely know, and this has been probably researched quite a bit, but since the 1980s, and maybe even before then, there's been a massive decrease in children's outdoor and risky play. And some of your listeners, this might be fairly obvious because they can reflect back to their own childhood and think about how children play now, and it feels quite different. So this this is kind of a societal trend where children have seen over time that children go outside less, so they want to do it less. They're also more enticed by screens. That's a massive problem to this, is that they have a screen for instant gratification, and so why would they want to go outside when they have this exciting pop-up stimuli inside their home? But it's also related to parenting, and it's not a fault of parents, but overall, the trend has been parents are working longer hours. You have more two working parents or multiple working members in a family. And so children are either in more after school programs or in scheduled activities like sports or academics. And those are really taking away from those free play experiences. And then overall, as a society, we've become way more risk adverse. So we've created everything with safety in mind. And there's great things that have been implemented, thinking about seatbelt laws or helmet use or distracted driving laws. Those have all dramatically decreased injury rates for children. But at the same time, we've really limited exposure to risk-taking experiences on things like playgrounds or just even out on the neighborhood, being able to navigate sidewalk. Like I know for me, my road, we don't have sidewalks. And it's, somewhere where I have to take my daughter to teach her how to navigate those type of terrains. So it's just interesting to see how society has, as a whole, in so many different ways, moved towards this direction where we're making things as safe as necessary, um, or sorry, as safe as possible. So we're really putting in all these things to make things as safe as
Mm-hmm.
possible instead of as safe as necessary,
Right.
which is just how do we eliminate serious injuries?
Okay, thank you for that. Do you do any work with teachers in classrooms or observation?
Yeah, so I myself, most of my research is in childcare, so early learning in childcare environments, the 0 to 6-year-old age group. But many of our colleagues and we've done some projects in the school system, so we are familiar with them, and a lot of the stuff we do in childcare is applicable to school as well.
Have you worked with teachers where they're doing maybe something a little different than their coworkers, where they are kind of on board with your research? They're taking their kids out as much as they can, as much as the curriculum will allow for risky play. And are they seeing more positive results academically or socially in the classroom because of that?
Yeah, we haven't done anything that's looked at academic outcomes per se, but a colleague of mine, Dr. Megan Zenny, she does a lot of work in this area, and her work really looked qualitatively at teachers' perspectives. She is a teacher in one of the local school districts and does fully outdoor classrooms. She's now a teacher consultant, but most of her practice was fully outdoors doing gardening programs and integrating the core curriculum into those programs. And so a lot of her work has showed that teachers know, they just know that this works, right? So when they do it, they see. And sometimes it's not related to academic outcomes, it can just be regulation.
Right.
So they might have a really challenging classroom, and going outside can actually completely change the dynamics of the class. And we see that in our childcare research as well. Sometimes the educators, their biggest win from getting kids outside is just the regulation piece. So we know that when
Yeah.
children are outside, they can run faster, they can yell, they can make noise, and all those things can support a child to feel calmer, more regulated than when they're confined within four walls.
Yeah, and I do just want to differentiate because we're interchangeably often using outdoor play and risky play, but I really want to get at the nugget of risky play. So this could be indoors at a skate park. This could be an indoor rock climbing wall because I think the point is the risk. Like there's a whole like volume of research about outdoor education. Like we know about going outside, right? But what I'm so interested in is your research specifically about risk. And I think that could be inside too, as long as there's a structure involved that's creating that element of risk. Is that right?
Yeah, so risky play can definitely occur inside. And when I do talk about outdoor play, risky play is a component of that. And often, I guess in our work, we really look at outdoor play as also outdoor risky play. So that's
Okay.
kind of the activities we're trying to evoke in this outdoor play experience. But the difference, why we focus mostly on the outdoors, is because with research, we've seen that if you were to take comparable things or experiences, children naturally are going to take on more risks when they're outdoors. That's
Ah,
just, yeah. So even if you have an environment that might set up risk indoors, they are going to want to do risk taking more outdoors. And there's just more challenge outdoors. So that can be related to how the environment is set up. So there's more opportunities to climb, to jump, to run. Or it could be that they feel a different feeling when outside. So they feel more freedom. And that's come up a lot in our work when we talk to children is, you ask them about what they like to do outside, and sometimes all they say is, "I like to be free." And they don't always get that feeling indoors. And I think a lot of that has to do with children are just indoors so
yeah.
much now. that getting outside is like this free feeling that they don't always get to feel. And I think that's a really considerable area of this where we are trying to get them outside more so they can take on more of those risks.
I love that. I do want to talk a little bit about, weather as a barrier to outdoor risky play. But I notice that you do talk a lot, like making that differentiation. You talk about, the difference between like an organized sport outside versus risky play. And I thought this is so interesting. I got to ask her for advice. So I'm coaching soccer. I'm assistant coaching. And we get the boys right after school, and it's quite mayhem. It's like 8, 9, 10-year-old boys, and it's like really hurting cats. And so I'm reading your research. And I'm thinking, well, maybe it would be better for all sports coaches if we could have like 10 minutes of the practice that has nothing to do with the sport, like nothing to do with baseball or soccer. 10 minutes about like a risky play or a risky play game of freedom, and then you bring them back to do the organized sport. And I'm wondering what you think about that.
So it's a great point, and it's always an interesting line. For me, I have a lot of lived experience in this realm because I was a competitive athlete being shuffled, 2 hours across the city every day after school for like a high performance training center environment. And I recognize the value of sport. It is important, or some kind of structured activity. You get different skills from that. You learn how to work as a team. You have to take instruction from usually an adult. There's a lot of considerations around physical activity and moving your body, and getting kind of that coaching experience. And so that's not to say that sport is, a negative at all. There's lots of benefits, but what we see now is children often are mostly doing sport to fill their play or their physical activity need, and then there's no time for this free outdoor experience where they actually have to choose what they want to do. And you can't really set that up. So it's not something you could say, all right, we're going to get our team together and we're all going to supervise and then let you go and decide what you want to do. It kind of has to happen organically, especially when we're talking about that middle years. So if you're talking about, grades 6 and up, uh, children are going to struggle to figure out what they want to do outside on their free time. That's why you see them often on devices, because it's a skill almost that they have to learn to say, I'm just going to go outside and see what I feel like doing. And if they get bored, that's a really hard thing to work through. And so that's really the difference that we're trying to evoke here is it's child-led, it's unstructured, and that's often where you develop more of a positive relationship with the outdoors and risk taking because it's fully intrinsic. So there's no coach or telling you what to do. And I'll just end with this question on my personal experience because I was involved in competitive sport until I was about 22 when I finished playing at university. And I really had to relearn how to play again. And I had risky play and outdoor play in my childhood, but it was interesting as an adult to have to sit in boredom when I was like, I'm just going to go outside and see what I feel like doing as an adult. Because I was so used to someone telling me, go do your mile test or go train on the field. And it's an important life skill to have to be able to play outside even as an adult.
Thank you for answering that. I think what you're saying is even as a coach, it would be really hard to facilitate like a risky play before a serious coaching session. It's really something that's child led, and I think you're going to get into this more on opportunities that we can create for our kids, our youth, our young children when you come and do the workshops. Can you talk a little bit about what that will entail and when that is?
Yeah, so I will be talking about what is outdoor risky play, a little bit of what we talked about. So just some background on that. But really, what I'm going to get into is how we support it. And our work, we focus on three key ingredients: time, space, and freedom. And when those pieces are in place, there's opportunity for children to decide to do this form of play. So time, they just need the time in their schedule, right? So they can carve out, but as if they're overscheduled and have things all the time, then they're not going to have the time to do this. And that could be in the school system, in the childcare, in outside of school at home. And then you need the space. So the space has to be set up. There has to be challenge. There has to be risk that they can take on. So that can look very different depending on the age. As I mentioned, for my daughter, a sidewalk's a big challenge right now, going up the lip in the sidewalk. Whereas for middle years or older children, they're going to seek out trees to climb. They might need tools, saws, drills, things that they can manipulate in the environment. They could also look like playing at speed. So what you're talking about, skateboarding, biking with their friends. And then you need the freedom. So children need the freedom to do risk taking. And that usually involves an adult taking a step back and trusting that they are competent to take on that activity. So I'm going to talk a little bit about those three areas and how those three considerations can be best set up to support this form of play at different ages. So birth all the way to 18 plus into adulthood, mostly focusing on childhood. And yeah, I think you asked about when the workshops are happening.
Yes.
Yeah, so they're happening on Monday, that's the 16th, I believe, and the 17th. So both from 6 to 8 p.m. And yeah, if you want more information, you can go to the Clayoquot Biosphere Trust website. And I believe they have the information on there. And this is also surrounding the free to play grant. So very exciting grant opportunity. And they have more information on their website as well.
We're talking about risky play with Rachel Ramsden. She will be hosting a workshop about the topic early next week, hosted by the Clayoquot Biosphere Trust. This talk, however, has been brought to you by Black Rock Resort in Ucluelet and Tourism Tofino because they sponsor our community calendar and our community report. So you will be hearing about this talk when we shout out the event next week when we do our weekend community calendar. And that's thanks to Black Rock and to Tourism Tofino for always keeping us updated and also just sponsoring that spot so that we can let you, the listener, know what's happening. So we played a couple songs. We gave you some time, listener, to text in a question that you might have to Rachel Ramsden about risky play. So I'm just going to do a mic test again to make sure we hear Rachel. Rachel, are you with us?
I am. Can you hear me?
Absolutely. We should be pros at this. The amount of time that we lose power is unbelievable. I have a very good friend that's an engineer who lives here, and she said she's never really seen anything like our power grid and how often we lose power, considering we don't even get like sub-zero temperatures. So thank you for bearing with us this morning while we get everything up and running. And we are, oh, good. I'm getting some tech feedback. Okay, the green knob is going down. How does that sound now? Still echoey? Thank you, listener. I did put it out to you, the listener, that might have been listening earlier about Rachel's research and the research of her coworkers about risky play. If you, friend, listener, have a question about it, and you did. So you spoke earlier, Rachel, about, we mentioned it earlier, and I tried not to focus on it because I didn't want to reveal my bias about screens. But because you alluded to it, this listener caught it as well. We talked about the relationship between risky play and screen time. And this question is, can risky play serve as an antidote to screen time complacency?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm glad the listener brought it up. I don't talk about screen time too much, but essentially what we do know is that screen time takes away from risky play, and then the opposite can also happen where risky play, outdoor play can take away from screen time. So if we had, a dial, we would want that dial to be going towards the outdoor risky play rather than the screen time. Now, screen time devices, they're just a part of children's lives. And so it's also establishing a healthy relationship with those tools. So, you think about watching the news or getting information, screens can serve a purpose, but what we're seeing with children today is that they're using screens to fill that void of boredom or regulation. And that's really where outdoor risky play serves a way better role for if you're bored, if you need to self-regulate. And for children, that's especially true, but it also applies to adults. So I think in regards to your listener, yes, for sure, outdoor risky play can serve the child a lot better than a screen can. And I'm sure that's fairly obvious. Everyone knows this. It's it's a tool for all these things that children are experiencing now. They can really get the benefits of emotion regulation and, just being outside, feeling the air, feeling the wind, feeling the grass. Those provide so many more benefits than scrolling on a screen.
Yeah. It's a bit of a mic drop there. Uh, how long term are your studies? I think I asked you this earlier. I don't mean to repeat a question, but if you're looking at children now, you mentioned being, starting university and having access to the screen, but we are seeing children right now kind of born into the screen generation. When do you think is the soonest we could get a long-term study on risky play for this generation and versus kids that are not engaging in risky play and they're more at home taking their risks on video games? I'm thinking specifically. When do you think we'll start to see that data come out?
Yeah, it's a great point. Long-term studies are really, really hard. They're very expensive, very resource intensive. One of the things I think that we do that we're really looking at from a more of a short-term perspective is we're actually looking at research, but also can we implement a tool or support a tool to try and make the situation better? So whether that's modifying spaces or supporting educators. So most of our research is within a 4-year time frame. So that could be looking at 2, 3 years of change and measuring risk taking and risky play before an implementation of a program and afterwards. So that kind of serves twofold. It's over time, are there trends that we're seeing, but also are there ways that we can increase or enhance comfort level with risk taking through a program or a tool? And that's in the childcare system or the school system is mostly what we focused on. So we have some of those shorter term studies going on, but what I can say is from some of these tools that I mentioned earlier that the Human Early Learning Partnership does, they actually measure child vulnerability and child development all the way through high school. And so there are ways that we can link the data for children going, over the lifespan or over the childhood span to see how risk taking might support their development into youth. And so we haven't looked at that yet because actually risk taking is a fairly new question that we implemented in the early childhood questionnaire. And that's just because it's kind of a new emerging area. I mean, Mariana's been studying it for about the past 15 years, but it's still sometimes we need to convince and educate that this is actually an important part of childhood. And perhaps before the 1980s, we didn't even need to say risky play because it was just a natural part of childhood. But now we actually have to term it because it's missing so much from children today. So, in regards to your question, I hope that in the next 5, 10 years, our work especially can focus on those longer term looking into youth. But for now, our work hasn't been able to take on those big of projects, but definitely across the world, I think there's other countries that are looking at this and looking at incorporating it into their standardized, census or questionnaires on these types of experiences.
Okay, I just want to take a moment now too. If you are an educator listening or a parent, Just thank you for maybe going out of your comfort zone and creating spaces, opportunities for your kids or the kids you're educating to have opportunities like risky play. I'd like to know if you think there are enough systems in place, Rachel, to support parents, educators, caretakers to get over their own fear or their own roadblocks so that they can encourage children to engage in risky play. Example, I have a friend that's very anxious about any kind of risk about her son getting injured. I would say that she is the real hindrance to him engaging in any kind of risky play. What support might be there for her? Especially if I'm going to your workshop, can I learn about any kind of support that could be there for the adult so that the adult could then create this container for the kid to have risky play?
Our website, Play Outside Lab, we have 3 tools that we've developed. One is for teachers, one's for educators, and one's for parents. And it's really meant to be an easy, interactive tool to get the supports and knowledge to take that baby step to facilitating more risk. And when I say baby step, I say that because I think often when I do talks or workshops, the common questions I get from parents or educators or teachers are like, wow, you're talking about things like fire. That is so far away from where I'm at, or tools or saws. And that baby step doesn't mean that tomorrow you go and do something that you're completely uncomfortable with. So these tools are really meant to give you the knowledge so that you can make those baby steps. And an example of a baby step might be removing the word or the saying, be careful, out of your
I love that.
vocabulary. So that's a big one that I'll talk about a bit in the workshops, is how you can replace be careful in your vocabulary. And often it's just ingrained in us, right? So I still say it sometimes. It's hard, it slips out, and it's an instinct, but there's no information given with be careful, right? We're just basically like, be careful, stop, no. But then the child's like, what do you want me to do? You have given me no information. And so instead, we can evoke more of a conversation, such as, hey, where are you going with your next step? Or how does your body feel when you do that? And that's, kind of eliciting more of a conversation with the child to understand their comfort level, and then showing that we trust them as well.
I think I need to write down how does your body feel when you do that and write it on my hand. I was at the skate park yesterday with my son and saw him do like endless falls on a metal rail. And I was like, I don't know if I'm a skate park mom. I think I'm hindering his risk taking by being here. And I said something to him and he was quite upset with me, right? And he said, you are showing that you don't trust me. And he was really taking a very, I perceive to be dangerous risk. It's like beyond dropping into the steep stuff. It's doing a feature where you're like sliding a skateboard on a metal beam. And he hurt himself, but he doesn't care that he hurt himself. But I was like wincing on the sidelines, asking these like ridiculous questions that were not helping him. But I like, how does your body feel? Because you put it back in their court to decide if they want to continue to take the risk. So thank you for that. I was going to say, do you have a tip for any listener? And I think the be careful one and how does your body feel? What about another one that you could leave our listener with today?
Yeah, so another tip that uh, we sometimes use in our workshops is, we call it a 17-second rule, but it can be any amount of time. And we have kind of this image where it's like, instead of jumping in and saying something as soon as you feel like it, can you take a couple seconds to just pause? And sometimes even 5 seconds, when you pause, you're like, oh, the moment has passed and I actually didn't need to say anything. And so sometimes silence is the best form of communication with risk taking, because children are so used to being interrupted or being stopped or switched into a different activity in the school day. And so sometimes just letting children be without any adult prompts is the best approach. Now, obviously, as an adult, we have a duty of care. So if there is a hazard, as I talked about earlier, in the environment, then of course there's a need to communicate there. But it's also, we have tools for, instead of saying be careful, but sometimes we don't need to say anything at all. So we kind of use 17 seconds as, can you count to 17? And then if you still feel the need to say something, go ahead and say it. But sometimes that break is all you need to just go, wow, I really didn't need to say anything.
I love that. These are some very helpful hints, or tools. I'm assuming you're going to delve more into that with the workshop. Before we sign off today, could you let our listener know where can they find you in Tofino or Ucluelet or both communities if they're really interested in learning more?
So all the information is on the Clayoquot Biosphere Trust website. And because I I'm just going to say this, I'm brand new. I have never been to your community before. So I'm really excited to come visit, but I'll be there on Monday, February 16th from 6 to 8, and then Tuesday, February 17th from 6 to 8, running workshops on outdoor risky play and how to support it. And this is all in relation to the Free to Play grant. So again, you can find them on social media and the webpage, and I think they have all the information. So I'm really excited to come visit for my first time, explore your community and your beautiful, beautiful land. And yeah, I hope to see many of you there.
That's wonderful. Do you get to bring your kid with you to climb over some rocks and logs?
I am. I'm so excited. I'm
Okay,
bringing my daughter.
that's wonderful.
We love to play outside here, and I think she's going to love it over there.
Yeah.
So we're really excited.
Okay, well, thank you very much for talking with us this morning, and thank you for hosting this workshop. I know there's so many people in this community that are interested in the topic. They're already doing it, but it's so exciting to come and learn something in a formal environment where you can always kind of increase your tool set and be a better leader for this kind of thing for your children and for your students. And so I think it's for adults, this workshop, like adults, educators, parents. It's not for kids. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, I have done workshops with everyone. I've even done baby and mom or parent classes with 6-month-olds crying. So I've done it all, but I believe for the most part, it's geared towards adults. And yeah, that's probably the content that will mostly be covered.
Okay, well,
And children know how to play.
they
They know
know.
how to do it.
They don't need
So
any lessons.
yeah.
Although I do kind of get scared the more I see the dependency on the screen. I do. This is a whole other topic. Wonder if they are somehow unlearning these innate abilities to play and to play in a risky way. So that's to be continued. We'll talk later about that.
Yes. Yes, would love to. So thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah.
This was such a great conversation.
Yeah, I agree. And we look forward to hosting you in person next week. And thank you to the Clayoquot Biosphere Trust for hosting this workshop and for letting us know about the Free to Play grant. Anyone that's interested, please go online at the Clayoquot Biosphere Trust. Thank you to Tourism Tofino and Black Rock Resort for letting us know what's happening in our West Coast community. And to you, Rachel Ramsden, thank you for doing the research that's so important right now.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Have a good day, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to Tuff City and Ucluelet Radio.